Hi guys, I'm really sorry for the delay in getting started today. There's a bit of a confusion over technology. So can everyone hear us now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, good. So hi, I'm Iain Pringle, and this is the Loyalty Leader Insights webinar from Loyalty Summit. This afternoon we'll be exploring the topic managing loyalty across industries and why the travel loyalty is different. To explore this fascinating topic, I'm joined by Adam Posner. Hi, Adam.
Hi.
From the Point Loyalty, and Rob MacLean, Director, CEO, and founder of Points.com. Hi, Rob.
Good morning.
Hi. So to get us started, guys, can you each just give us a quick introduction to yourself if people don't know you from the world of loyalty, and give some insights into your experience in travel and non-travel loyalty programs? Adam, why don't you kick us off with that?
Yeah, thanks, Iain. So my life of loyalty began in 1993 with a retailer scratch and save coalition program. So I go back to the early 90s as a data-driven marketer, and fast forward to today, I'm running a consulting firm, The Point of Loyalty, looking after brands of all shapes and sizes in travel, not airline, but more hotel and non-travel, or retailers and various other hospitality and other type businesses, consulting, as well as I've authored and commissioned 11 research studies on customer loyalty and loyalty programs called For Love or Money.
Fantastic. And Rob?
Yeah, I'm probably on the other end of the spectrum. Really been an operator in the loyalty space for the last 25 years or so. It seems like a long time ago, I ran the Canadian Airlines frequent flyer program up until the merger with Air Canada, and then started Points in 2020. And we've been working with loyalty programs since that time. So we've got 70 partners that we work with that has given us some really interesting exposure to and insight into a variety of different hotels and airlines and their approach to loyalty. I think more recently, we've seen some exposure to retail type programs and financial services, which definitely create a different dynamic than what we've seen in travel. So yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah,
great. And I'm Iain Pringle, so I'm a loyalty consultant at New World Loyalty. I started out years ago when I had as much hair as Adam when we started out many years ago, and that was at Shell UK. So where we launched the Shell Smart program, which was really the first coalition program in the UK, well before Nectar. So that was retail coalition program then. Then I worked with EDF Energy with Nectar when that first launched many years ago. I then joined Air Miles, which then became Avios in the UK, where I was head of retail partnerships. So there I had a foot in both camps of airline loyalty and retail loyalty. And then I managed the analytics team, and then was finally head of strategy at Avios, where Air Miles became Avios in the UK. I was then at Virgin Atlantic, where I actually managed travel loyalty programs, so all the travel partners and airlines, as well as the retail partnerships there too. So I guess I've seen life from loyalty from both sides of the fence, especially on retail and travel loyalty. So I guess probably a good place to start about the very different nature of both of those types of approaches. So first of all, just to get us started, what do we think the key differences are between how companies manage travel loyalty programs and how non-travel loyalty programs manage each other? What would you think? Rob, would you like to start on that? What do you think the three big differences between travel loyalty programs and non-travel loyalty programs are?
Yeah, there are lots of similarities, but to me the differences are probably fall into three camps, at least in my mind, have the most influence. I think first and foremost, the travel loyalty programs have evolved into profit centers over time. I think most, not all, and I think most of the commentary today is probably indicative as opposed to absolute. Most, but not all of the retail or non-travel programs still are cost centers in their various entities. And I think that's really a fundamental difference in kind of where travel has evolved and how it's taken loyalty, and hopefully we'll get a chance to kind of explore that. I think what falls out of that as another significant difference as we think through travel versus non-travel, that kind of profit motive, the fact that they become these massive successful businesses in their own right, has led to kind of a more standalone approach, from a management standpoint, from a focus standpoint. I think that's led to probably a little more, generally a little more sophistication and kind of broader management skill set. I think, we've watched from the days when I was running a loyalty program in the airline business, and we were largely marketers that kind of grew up within the airline, to now what I see when we work with the biggest loyalty programs around the world. We're really working with very, very sophisticated management teams, business managers, as opposed to marketers per se. And I think, non-travel is still very heavily skewed to kind of a marketing mindset, as opposed to a broader business mindset. And again, there's a lot of downstream implications to that, I think. And then I'd say, try to wrap up and kind of start the conversation. To me, the third kind of primary difference is that travel, for whatever reason, has seemed to define loyalty as a much longer term engagement. My experience, at least, with that travel loyalty aspect is I'm building a relationship with Iain Pringle over the long haul. It takes a long time to earn redemption. It takes a long time to kind of get that kind of big award. They tend to be very long-term relationships, lots of kind of aspirational elements to it. All those things that come from that long-term cycle and long-term engagement, where most of my experiences with kind of retail financial services type loyalty programs tend to be a little more transactional, a little more shorter term, probably a bit more focused on kind of making a sale or doing a transaction here and now, a little more short term versus what I see on the travel side. So those are all big differences and kind of high level topics, but I think those three elements really distinguish the difference between what I see in travel versus what we're starting to see in financial services and retail and some of these other equally innovative but just different kinds of loyalty programs.
I definitely agree with you on the profit center to cost center side, and I think almost that's the biggest gravity that defines the differences between them, because you then see it's then the consequences of those decisions, or the consequences being a cost rather than being a profit center, then drive so many different things, and you just see it by who's got their hand on their shoulder. So in travel loyalty programs, it's always kind of Rev Man has the hand on the shoulder, because revenue management is the guys that keep the score on redemption. Whereas in retail loyalty programs, it's often finance that then have your hand on the shoulder, and that drives different behaviors and different dynamics within the program, for sure. For sure. Well, what would you say, Adam, in your experience?
Yeah, just to continue on that theme, besides, I've got a different kind of view of the differences, but just in my experience working as a consultant with so many different brands and businesses, I think non-travel loyalty programs have got a lot to learn from travel-based programs who, in terms of an asset, building a real asset for the business rather than a cost. And the first question I always get is, so what's this going to cost me, rather than what's the return on loyalty investment. So I think there's a lot to learn from that focus in travel for non-travels. But for me, it's more about the consumer behavior. So in travel, I get it's in the most, the business really pays for the employees' benefits. So in business travel, which there's business and there's personal and there's visiting friends and relatives, but when I travel for the business pays. So I benefit in the most cases from all the points and all accruing all the benefits. But in non-travel, the consumer pays. So you've got a different sort of mindset.
I agree with that.
I think between those two. Also in program structure, I feel that travel programs are heavily earn and burn, points collector mechanisms. So it's very gamification psychology. There's this whole, I guess you know that you're working towards something based on whatever you're behaving. But in non-travel, the program structures are less points oriented. Oh yes, they are in grocery and various others, but there are lots more package of benefits, discount programs, cashback programs. There are points programs, certainly, but I almost feel as if travel is totally points and miles and a collector.
Yeah.
And the last one that I've got on the three is sort of similar to what Rob was saying, which I think travel loyalty programs are heavy ego and exclusivity driven. The psychology of them. Because of the status, because of the tiers, because of the lounge and the boarding and the upgrades. It's a lot of ego and exclusivity in the psychology of those. Whereas in non-travel, similar to what Iain says, it's less about egos and more about money. Not exclusively, because there's some great non-travel programs which do have tiers and status, but fundamentally I see those are the differences.
Yeah, and I think to build on that, I think it's amazing the different psychologically between the two programs. I mean, when you see customers discussing a retail program, they use words like earned and like it takes a similar amount of time to get a reward, but they talk about earning and they feel that they have earned a reward. Whereas in frequent flyer programs, the language that they use is I deserve, and I deserve this, and you should give me this, and I've seen it in research. There was once we did a bit of research with Avios years ago, when we were actually doing the change from Avios to Air Miles to Avios, and we had a guy. It was one of the gold status people, and they were we showed them some previews of what the changes were likely to be, and there was a guy banging on the window, banging on the kind of mirrored window, saying, "This is ridiculous. I demand one of you guys. I know there's some guys who have designed this in that room. Come out here and talk to me now about why." You would never see that in a retail program. Never, ever, ever.
Yeah, look, one of the things that, as you said, having some disagreements here probably makes for a more interesting discussion. One of the comments that Adam made there, it's interesting on this idea of, the airlines or travel programs being more narrow. My sense is quite the opposite. Like I think, in running the loyalty program for the airline, I always thought I was getting into it on, you got all these miles and or points that was really the anchor in the whole loyalty program. I think as I got into the business, realizing to me that was the kind of table stakes, the currency itself, the fact that I earn or burn miles and points was obviously critical, right? This is a 50-year-old industry now. People have collected a lot of that currency. They understand that currency. It's a phenomenal mechanic. But to me, one of the things that's different again between loyalty outside of travel is that transactional points or discount based, very kind of focused, I think a bunch of benefits with that. Whereas I think the travel guys have been able to figure out you need to wrap that currency with a lot more, whether it's a broader offering. It's the tier status, Adam, as you said. It's that recognition. It's that, because I'm loyal and I'm generating more economics, then I get to the front of the line at the airport, or I have a chance for upgrades in the better seats. You get nights off or upgrades in hotels, etc. To me, that's what's been a big change over 20 or 30 years is loyalty practitioners in travel are wrapping the base currency with all kinds of other kind of service benefits or recognition benefits. And I do think that goes back to the earlier comment, as a profit center and as the revenue management person kind of tapping you on the shoulder, as you said, Iain, it's given them much more room to be innovative, to kind of invest and maybe not have to kind of get that exact ROI figured out on, okay, if I put a lounge in place and give Adam access to the lounge, I don't necessarily have to turn that into a transaction that I can evaluate right away. And to me, the travel programs are much broader than my experience, at least on the non-travel, which is very discount oriented, very kind of transactional. So it's just an interesting perspective, and maybe some of that is different parts of the world as well. But if I'm a $4 billion business like Delta Sky Miles, I've got lots of legs to be able to go out and add a whole bunch of other service benefits to being a loyal customer.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I would say is one of the ones I've noted down here is that I think that if you're a big airline like Delta, or a big airline like British Airways, or a big airline like American, I don't think you really ask yourself why you should have a loyalty program. because you're in an alliance. You have to have a loyalty program, okay? And also because it makes so much money that you have to have a loyalty program. Whereas I think if you're a retailer, you ask yourself all the time, should I have a loyalty program, and should I still have a loyalty program, and is this loyalty program profitable, and am I getting the return on all this money I'm putting in? And they, I mean, Tesco is a great example. They've done 25 years of having a loyalty program, but I bet they ask themselves all the time, should I still have it? And I don't think the airlines do. I think the airlines might justify individual transactions along the way and benefits along the way, but I don't think they ever sit back and say, unless you're a really low-cost carrier, you don't sit that back and go, should I have a loyalty program?
I think that's right.
I think you're spot on. I think you're spot on. Sorry, in that I get asked, should I even ask, why do you need a program? Do you really need a loyalty program? Yeah. All the time. I've got a little diagnostic, which is, do you really need a loyalty program? And I get them to rank and rate different reasons until they're really clear that they need one and why. So you're spot on. I mean, in the non-travel, and it's not only retailers. I mean, we talk about retail, but it's hospitality, it's gaming, it's fuel and convenience, it's insurances have got benefits. And the word loyalty program, benefits program, rewards program, incentive program. There's so many ways to bundle the words, but it's back to the behaviors you want to change and the mechanism you're going to do that and the structure around it. So if we're going to try and find areas to agree or disagree, I absolutely agree that retailers are always saying, and the like, always saying, do I really need one?
Yeah, I mean,
somebody said to me a number of years ago, as in our company, we're working primarily with pre-existing big scale loyalty programs, but we kind of get lots of people reaching in to say, hey, can you help us build a loyalty program, which is really not our thing. But in the early days, you get into some of those conversations, and somebody once said to me, if you're a retailer or a business thinking about getting into loyalty, one of the first things you want to do is you need to talk to your CFO and have a good heart-to-heart conversation that if you're really going to build a scale loyalty proposition with all of the kind of elements that go with that, you better have 150 million US sitting in the bank account as a budget to kind of get this thing rolling. And I don't know if that number's right by any stretch, right? That's a number of years ago. But what it did suggest to me was it's much more complex to start something from scratch than most businesses recognize. We're big proponents, to be honest, of, look, if you want to kind of tap into loyalty, there are some phenomenal brands out there with hundreds of millions of consumers engaged. Start kind of learning your craft by partnering with a bunch of loyalty programs where you can offer an incentive, whether it's an Avios currency in the UK or a Mileage Plus or a Rapid Rewards currency in the UK with Avios. Dip your toe into it. Work with some of these practitioners of loyalty. See if your member base is going to respond to that currency or that incentive. Good choice of words there, Adam. Before you really jump in kind of whole hog, because it is a big investment. It's sophisticated. There's lots of kind of landmines. And I think you can find ways to tap into loyalty with pre-existing programs and then kind of graduate or evolve. If it works for your business, whatever your business happens to be, then you may well be inclined to kind of go start your own currency or start your own program. But I've seen so many programs jump in without really thinking it through.
And I think that in retail, people are predisposed to have a relationship with you even without rewards at all, which is certainly not necessarily the same on travel. So I'd like to move on to the next question. But before we do so, I'd just like to say thank you to our sponsors. So our sponsors are Engage People, Amia, Adara, Hilton Honors, who is our official hotel and venue sponsor for Travel Loyalty Summit in Americas, and Radisson Rewards, who's our official hotel and venue partner for the Loyalty Summit London. So next question, what I'd like to do is, what do you think travel loyalty programs could learn from non-travel loyalty programs? So this is, what do you think Delta, for example, could learn from Boots or Tesco or Walgreens? Who would like to? Rob, would you like to kick us off this time on that one?
Well, I went first class, but yeah, I can
Oh,
do
sorry.
that.
Will Adam go first this time? Sorry.
Give Adam a shot at that.
Adam can have a shot at this one.
Yeah, I'm happy to have a go. I'm not such a deep specialist like Rob is in travel, but I think that travel loyalty programs can learn about a cause connection. So I believe that some of the larger retail and other loyalty programs are finding a way to give back to community in a bigger way or more overt way. So, for example, Thrive Markets in the US, Richie's Community Benefits in Australia is a totally dedicated cause-related program that gives back to the community. 50 million given back by their loyalty program. My school in South Africa, My Village, My Planet, by Woolworths, a huge give back program. So all I'm saying is if we can learn anything is I don't see so much, and I'm a consumer of travel loyalty. I'm not a practitioner like Rob is, but I don't see much of the cause-related giving back. Although in recent times, just in the bubble we're in right now, it's come up. So that's one.
I would build on that as well to say I had that right at the top of my list as well. I think when you're with an airline, the focus is on profit, and therefore redemption is about your relationship with revenue management, about getting the seats at the right price, and la-di-da-di-da-di-da-di-da. It's about redemption and cost. Funny enough, even though they're a profit center, right? When you're a loyalty practitioner in a retail space, you're looking for what will change behavior. And the reason why companies like Tesco give away more money for redeeming outside of Tesco is because it has a bigger change of behavior. And I don't think airlines ask themselves that question at all. They ask themselves, what's the value I can give to customers? They don't really look at saying, what change of behavior am I going to get from my customers? So a retailer will look at a reward and say, if I get a reward, what's the uplift in spend after the reward that I'm going to get on my bottom line? Airlines, I don't think, look at that anywhere near as much detail as they should. They look at the bottom line, but they don't necessarily look at change of behavior. Would you agree with that, Adam?
Yeah, absolutely. And the example you talk about outside giving, and even though you talk about that example, I think the other one, if I can think of one other, is simplicity. I think that travel loyalty programs are complex from a consumer point of view. I call it tears for tears. It's like I start crying when I'm trying to understand all the different pieces of the puzzle. And this is just as a consumer of the program, whereas by nature, non-travel generally start off quite simple because of the fact, as Rob said, that, it's hard to build a program. So let's start simple. But I think there's a lesson in simplicity that travel loyalty programs could learn from non-travel.
Yeah, I agree with that. Although I should, Rob, would you like to throw one in there? Would you like to throw one of the ones you've written down here?
Maybe I'll kind of respond to your comment around kind of behavior, particularly with the airlines. I'll kind of be a bit broader with travel. I don't see that. I think while the profit center is a primary driver, I think that's for sure. My experience with from running to kind of working with some of the biggest brands, I think the level of sophistication in terms of actions they take and what they're trying to drive is actually very high. It's narrow. It's typically trying to drive either revenue for the loyalty program or revenue to the parent entity, whether it's the airline, book a ticket, or move people onto a certain route that may not be doing or performing as well, or maybe trying to drive lift from an economy ticket to a full Y ticket or something like that. But I think I don't agree with the premise that the loyalty practitioners have kind of lost their way in terms of trying to change behavior. I still think that's at the core what the loyalty program is doing. It has this incremental benefit of being a profit center in and of itself, but I've been in an awful lot of conversations where people are saying, well, hey, look, that doesn't quite fit our brand, or it may not, our primary driver here is not to generate, revenue against the mileage sale. It's actually to drive engagement and get consumers to be, flying a purple airplane versus a red airplane. I've seen that consistently over the years. I also think, one of the comments you made earlier, Iain, that kind of historical, battle between the loyalty practitioners and the revenue management folks has forced loyalty over time, since day one, to be cognizant of, you can't just give away miles. You can't do triple and quadruple. There were days back in the, early part of the industry where that was happening. But now I think these are reasonably very sophisticated managers that are balancing the cost of issuing miles to the benefits that come in. So I don't think that premise really holds. I'm sure there's moments where you kind of lose track, but generally I don't think that's the case. To go back to your question, I totally agree with Adam in terms of the simplicity comment. I think that's a very good point. I think one of the things, if I'm a loyalty practitioner, the non-travel guys tend to be more frequency oriented. From my experience is that, from a retail standpoint, it's that kind of constant, I'm in there once a week, or I'm in there more often at a grocery store or a Shoppers Drug Mart, et cetera. And so they've become very good at that high frequency engagement. Whereas I think the loyalty guys in travel, because it's fewer touch points, a more long-term engagement, I think that the travel folks could learn a bit more about that kind of contact management with the consumer. I still see lots of nervousness in travel around over communicating to members. And so some of the kind of brand marketing teams saying, don't be talking to that database that often. I've always thought that's a bit odd, right? And part of what we're trying to accomplish in loyalty is to kind of create that engagement. You might not want to send the same message every time, but I think that the non-travel guys are better at that, managing the high frequency of communication and engagement and touch point that I think the travel folks could learn from. I also think gaming, and was one of the ones that Adam mentioned. I remember being at one of our partner conferences. We had I think it was MGM Grand came up, and they were kind of different kind of loyalty. They were gambling loyalty out of Vegas. And what I think blew away everybody in the room was the level of sophistication around their segments. I mean, they knew if there were 5 people sitting at a craps table, they were all 5 different segments. The level of detail and sophistication around the segmentation, I think it was because of that need for high frequency. It forced, a much more, much smaller, much more targeted segmentation. And I think the airlines and hotels have gotten better and better at that over the years, but I think there's still some learning to do on that.
Well, I think I'd sort of disagree with you on that. I think that I agree and disagree at the same time on that, because I've written down here personalization of communications. If you're a retailer and you go into or a convenience a restaurant, for example, casual dining. If you go into a brand like Nando's, everyone's in Nando's, right? So you've got the MD of the big company down the road, and you've got a guy in a boiler suit who's come straight from the assembly line. They're in Nando's, right? And that's what a retailer is looking for. A retailer is looking for everybody. I think that airlines would like to think they look for everybody, and the air marketing department think they're targeting everybody, but they're building up a platform that looks like a duck, talks like a duck. Funny enough, it's a duck. It's aimed at frequent flyers, right? If you name me a loyalty program, I'll bring it up on screen share now, and it'll be on there about car hire. It'll be on there about hotels, or beyond. Regardless of how frequently you travel, they go on about it because they're built on a platform for frequent flyers. And marketeers like to think they know about segmentation in airlines, but they're just not. And I think it's because they're underinvested for the long tail. And I think retailers just aren't. Retailers want everyone in there, and they're prepared to change their comms to focus on that frequency and changing their things to do that. And I just think airlines could learn a lot from that.
I think we're agreeing on that part.
Yeah, we are agreeing. We are agreeing, except that retailers are also getting smarter with segmentation.
That's true.
They're absolutely getting into their profiles and understanding the different generations. And whilst you say they want everyone in there, absolutely, but they are getting very, very smart in profiling and segmenting.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I think one of the other, and it's kind of the flip side, I'm not convinced that the kind of the non-travel, and we think of, at least my experience is more retail and kind of financial services. I think there is a way for those groups to, think a little bit longer term. I mean, when I look at some of the size and scale of some of the credit card loyalty programs, particularly in the U.S. with Chase and Citibank, and then the membership rewards, the base of customers is amazing, right? And it's growing. They tend to be reasonably deep relationships, but I think there's something those groups could learn from the airlines and hotels about kind of a longer term set of relationships and kind of component pieces to their loyalty programs that are maybe a little more long-term focused. I do think things like front of the line and the equivalents on the credit card side of things help with that. It's not purely transactional. It's kind of a value added offer. But when I see most of the kind of grocery and pharmacy and some of those types of programs, everything is just so transactional and so kind of here and now. From a way you earn and the way you burn, there's got to be some way that they could add some longer term aspirational elements to those programs as well. And again, I've always thought that added a ton of value to the travel programs.
I'd put some evidence on that too, Rob. Again, this is a big difference between the two types. I've worked in frequent flyer programs where I came away from a conference where the conference said, right, well, there's this golden moment after redemption. And I thought, oh, brilliant, this is great. I'm going to go and find this golden moment after redemption. Yeah, good luck finding that, right? Because after redemption in a long-term loyalty program like a frequent flyer program, especially in the long tail, they go, you get churn after a big redemption. Whereas in retail loyalty, in lower frequency where you're getting frequently redeeming, you get, as soon as you see a redemption, you see an uplift in behavior and an uplift in collection, almost invariably. And I think there's some balance between the two that needs to be found. Now, I'm not suggesting that in a long-term loyalty program that people who redeem are leaving because they've had a redemption. I don't think that's the case at all. But I do think that you have to be careful playing redemption and comparing one to another, because in retail loyalty programs where they have a quick turnaround of rewards and they have very, very low breakage rates, they're very different economics than the long-term programs. But I think you're right. You need to mix the two together, but the economics of one are very different from the economics of the other. Right, should we move on to the next question then? So we've looked at what travel loyalty programs could learn from non-travel. Why don't we flip it on its head by saying, what do you think non-travel loyalty programs could learn from travel loyalty professionals? Rob, you can go first this time because Adam went first last time.
Yeah, I guess I probably jumped across the line onto that already. I do think they kind of moving beyond the pure transactional, which again isn't every non-travel program, but it certainly seems to be a dominant component. A very heavy focus on discount, a very heavy focus on kind of the here and now transactional elements. I think you can learn from the travel businesses that have been, successful, growing, kind of made the path to profit center, et cetera. I think a lot of that comes from having a bit of a longer term view on what that customer relationship is going to be. So, that'd be one of the things I think I would throw out there. I think Adam mentioned it earlier in his consulting practices. How do you convince these kind of earlier stage, or maybe not even earlier stage, but non-travel programs to start thinking about it as an asset? I do think that is, that would be if I was tomorrow going to be asked to run a retail loyalty program, it would be the first thing I would write down as a to-do, would be to get to the leadership and the executive of the organization and establish that this is not a cost center, that this is not a problem area. We're doing this because it's an asset that can create tremendous value in its own right, but also in terms of driving revenues and profitability to the program. Or the company. That's ultimately why these programs exist. And I think that's a bit grayer area in the non-travel side that I think I'd jump on. And then there's just some of the stuff, probably the third thing, and maybe it ties back to the first. The kind of lifestyle type activity, the non-transactional elements, has proven to be not. You might disagree with this, Iain. most of the travel programs have elements of that. In some ways, they're lifestyle programs by definition, right? With the travel and et cetera. But whether it's adding kind of items like access to tickets and entertainment, et cetera, broadening the offering, I think it's proven to be effective, not to drive economics per se, but to kind of build engagement and build loyalty in the kind of maybe a softer term loyalty. I think you could see some of that stuff being baked into these more transactional programs, and it may not have to be a big cost issue, but it's part of building some brand and some reason to engage over the long term rather than just for my next purchase of groceries. So
yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, I've been in loyalty now 25 years, and this is something I learned really early on, and I've seen it happen time and time again in loyalty programs. And people who have worked with me will know what I'm about to say about spenders and savers, because I think we're all wired up differently. Some are spenders and some are savers, and some people want the short-term instant fix, instant gratification of a short-term reward. But some people are much more prepared to save up longer to get something more worthwhile. And I think that you need to, in a program, look at both of those behaviors and bake them both into your program. And the best examples of loyalty strategies I've seen have had both of those in the program. And I don't think you can compare it to be retail or non-retail travel, non-rep travel. I just think you have to have those things built in. And you know, Points have done it for a long time about exchanging and giving customers the choice of being able to do those two things. And I know we've talked about complexity as well before. I know Loyalty One with Air Miles in Canada, they had the choice. They gave customers a choice. Do you want to collect for cash back, or do you want to collect for long-term rewards? And I think it allows people to make those choices because the economics are so different. But I always recommend to have those things built in.
It's funny, if I can just say one example. When we started Points 1,000 years ago, some people that may be listening would remember kind of an old stalwart in the industry, Bruce Chemmel. And Bruce ran the Advantage program really through its halcyon years, where it was really doing some things that no other certainly airline loyalty programs were doing. They were just wildly profitable and very innovative. He sat on our advisory board for a short time in the very beginning of the company, and I remember him saying, if you have 80 million customers, these big travel loyalty programs, some of these big guys are 80 million, 100 million. I think Delta United have surpassed 100 million. Don't try to figure them all out. Give them utility, give them opportunities, because to your point, everybody's wired a little bit differently. And I thought, it was a good kind of a motherhood statement, perhaps, but it was a very kind of astute statement that if you're going to be a scale loyalty program, it isn't just one customer. If you've got 100 million customers, everybody's got a slightly different button. People have different time frames in terms of where their attention span is, and so you need to be consistently or constantly kind of innovating and making sure people have choices and utility with their currency. But he had a couple of those funny little snippets and sayings, but that was one that always stuck with me.
Adam, do you want to add any more?
Yeah, I'd love to add a few in there, and I still want to reiterate the assets story, because I really want to punch that one home for non-travel loyalty programs to learn from how the travel guys just are amazing in making it such a profit center. So I'll just want to reiterate that one. But I also think non-travel programs can learn from travel around adding partners. So they get
but before you move on to that, can I just play devil's advocate on what you just said about the asset? Because there is a case study in here where Tesco created dunnhumby, and Tesco tried to sell dunnhumby, but dunnhumby, without being linked to Tesco, wasn't worth enough money for Tesco to sell dunnhumby, so they took it off the market and they didn't sell it in the end. So I kind of struggle with the economic. I don't think the economics of creating an asset of the astonishing values that airlines have in a loyalty program can be replicated in non-travel loyalty.
It's not about replication, it's about learning. It's about focus. It's about return on loyalty investment. It's not cost. So it's the words we're using. I see asset, as something that is profitable, and profitable means you get revenue in, you have a cost out, and you have an incremental lift. So I'm not talking about selling parts of the business quite, I think that's too narrow-minded, narrow in its example. But back to adding partners, I think that a non-travel loyalty programs can look and learn and see how you add value to your member base outside of your transactional cashback or discount through partners. I see that as an opportunity for non-travel. I also think that back to Rob's point around experiential benefits. So we talk about moving, transactional to experiential because memory is created. You talk about it. So those little surprise delights, those moments of truth, it's not only about money. What else is it outside of money? Give me more than money. There's other stuff that I might want to create more of a connection. And I finally think that actually sort of contradicts an earlier comment from earlier on, is that non-travel programs can learn from travel programs about tiering. Now, not in complexity, but just in managing, in how to manage them to a certain extent, because they've had 50 years of experience in managing tiers, and I think non-travel can learn something.
Just to build on that, it's loyalty programs, the best that we've seen, and certainly that I've seen, it is that combination between reward and recognition. And it's a fair point, because the tier component is, the tier structures have enabled, I think, the travel folks to really kind of take recognition to a completely different level than a transactional retail program has historically been able to do. And if you're going to be big, you're going to be sustainable. And it's almost like that earlier comment where, when I went into loyalty, I thought, okay, it's all about the miles or all about the points. I think I learned quickly that those were table stakes, and that the real value was kind of in the recognition and in the kind of tier and the softer side of things that were critically important. And so I totally agree with you on that. It's harder to do if you're a transactional grocery store. There's,
if I could just jump in there, if I could just jump in there, Rob, it links to one of the questions that's come from Siddharth Kimi. Please, excuse me if I've got your pronunciation wrong, but he's saying that, and again, I'm going to paraphrase what he said in his question, but he's saying that, do you think that that the creation of subscription products within retail loyalty programs are going to create that two-tier position with retail programs in a way that we're seeing within travel programs? So these are basically, there's some examples, like, again, I'll use the example of Tesco in the UK, where they've created a subscription product where you get double miles and 10% off I think it's 2 shops per month, and up to a value of £250. Do you think that's a way where they're going to create 2 sets of members within programs, and they're starting to diverge with subscription?
That's for me.
Well, either really.
I think the answer is yes. Yeah, I think the answer is yes. And a good example of that, not so much subscription, but Air Miles here in Canada is a wildly successful program. Largely retail focused. It's got redemption that's travel oriented, but it's really a largely retail focused proposition. And they introduced kind of your normal tier and then the gold tier along the way. So you can certainly do that. I don't know all of their strategy on it, but if you're back to kind of Adam's partnering comment, if you're participating in multiple partners, you're in the grocery store, you're at the gas station, you're at the pharmacy, and all of their other participating partners, you're demonstrating a much more loyal persona to the program than if I use it kind of passively when I go to a grocery store and that's it. And so they're able to reward that customer with different benefits under a gold tier. And the ego comment earlier is a real one, right? People want to be carrying that gold card or put it on their luggage with a platinum or something of that nature. So I do think that the retailers are entirely capable of doing it. Subscription is a step in that direction, because if you can demonstrate to yourself that customer is more engaged, then you're likely in a position where you're able to deliver them different benefits based on the profitability or the revenue or the engagement that customer decides. So I totally think that's the case.
My comment on it would be just, what are you trying to do? And I think they're trying to do different things. I think that in retail loyalty programs, often the mass market programs are trying to get everyone's data, so they want as many people in there as possible, and that's the table stakes for that. But then the reason why you'd have a subscription is a completely different reason. That's often about share of wallet. And it's often about, in Tesco's case, I also suspect it's probably because their big out-of-town stores are now not getting the traffic they used to. Funny enough, 3 weeks on after lockdown, it's probably the complete opposite. But you know, so I think that they're trying to solve a different problem with a different mechanic.
Yeah, and also I think also it's a revenue gain. I mean, clearly when you're paying for something, there's got to be some revenue, gain. And the other thing is, once with a general program, when you join, it's free to join. Now, when you offer your base the opportunity to pay $10 a month for extra benefit, you're paying to be part of that. So it's paid loyalty, earned loyalty kind of thing. And sure, there's a segment, back to your point, Iain, about the objective behind it, but there's a segment of customers who will want to pay $10 a month for free delivery, for this, for that, for twice the points, for whatever it is, because they see the benefit of the $10 and the return that they get. So
as long as there's a value on the other side, that underpins it, then And look, and to me, there's nothing wrong with having different tiers in a loyalty scheme, as long as you're kind of, the why makes sense, and if the value proposition is differently, if Adam is, a multi-$1,000 customer over time, and Iain is a once a year touch point, we should be, as loyalty practitioners, thinking about treating that member or that individual differently. So it just seems like common sense.
The one sort of caveat I'd say, I think it goes right back to that first question we had about the differences between travel and non-travel. The thing with travel as a strange industry is it's completely, although you've probably got 300 people on an aircraft, it's absolutely socially unacceptable to sit next to you, and they're probably all paying different amounts. It's socially unacceptable to sit down and ask what you've paid for the flight. and yet in retail.
So have you ever done that yet?
No, I've boasted to my friends about what I paid for a flight, but I've never actually sat next to my neighbor and said, how much did you pay for this seat? Whereas I think in retail, it's different. Go on, Rob.
I spent some time in airline pricing at one point in my career, so I don't think I could ever answer the question that was asked anyway, why or how.
I think we've probably got not enough time for one more question. So this came from Brian Estep. Again, is it Brian Estep? And he says, Adam mentioned segmentation. How do you think different industries are doing on segmentation? And what needs to be to bridge the gap, if you believe there is one?
Wow, that's a very broad question, but back to segmentation.
Whole thing in its own.
And back to kind of category specific and sophisticated. Someone mentioned, I think it was Rob mentioned the word sophistication of the organization. I just fundamentally comes back to get back to be brilliant at the basics. Look at, high value, low value, medium value. Look at RFM, recency, frequency, and monetary. Break up the base to look at different segments, whether it's by value or lifestyle or profile. But there is a big range. Sorry, my hands. There is a range and sophistication of brands and businesses that I work with who are very, very good at segmenting, and others who just one size fits all.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. I say the biggest step change in performance I've seen in companies is by getting your segmentation right, and I want to make that as broad as possible, because there's all sorts of different segmentations. There's behavioral segmentations, psychological segmentations, there's attitudinal segmentations, there's segmentations. What retailers do very well is things like your network segmentations, where your different petrol stations can be you need to really understand whether your petrol station is a commuter petrol station, or is it destination petrol station, or is it on, because that will change what stock you have in there, and it makes the biggest change in performance. So there's all sorts of ways of approaching it, but if you haven't got a segmentation, give us a call, because I think you can make a huge difference to your industry by getting that right. Market segment, there's all sorts of different ways of doing it.
I think we'd agree. I mean, an example that we live, just the reality that of kind of pressures that the loyalty programs are under. I think in early days, you have an offer to send out, you'd send it to the power of that kind of big database. You'd send out 10 million emails, right? It was just, the power of that was pretty impressive. But these days the communication channels are under so much pressure. If you don't have the data analytics underpinning, why you're doing an offer or who's going to be, most likely to respond, eventually you just get to a stage where people just become numb to the communication. So, I know, us and our partners spend, I don't know how much time and energy on just making sure we can get these, it's more around propensity modeling as much as anything else. The data analytics under this underlying segmentation now is really, really interesting stuff, sophisticated. But to the point where you say, look, you can't send 10 million emails out anymore. You can't do that ongoing, but you still have a demand, in our business to generate 10 or 20 or $30 million of mileage sales. So you have to do that by touching, we have situations where we're generating more revenue off of 60% less touch points. You can't just get lucky doing that. You have to be able to go in and do the data analytics, as you said, Iain, and be able to kind of figure out, if Adam is likely to do a transaction, let's communicate to Adam now. But if Iain's not likely to do a transaction, let's not waste that touch point or that communication with Iain. Let's save that to a point in time when the data says he will do a transaction. You have to get good at that, where you end up just kind of spamming people, and that runs its course pretty quickly. So
the other thing I'd say is having the insights and doing something about it are two different things. So I worked with a retailer several years ago where they were finding there was a particular segment of customers that they found that was buying high grade organic food and low grade basic food. And what they found with that segment was that this was single mothers or single parent families feeding their children in a time of difficulty, feeding their children organic food and feeding themselves basic food. And that is an observation that you can make about your customers that's incredibly important and insightful, but it's not something you can do anything about on CRM. And I think there's getting those insights into what your customers are doing and why is really, really important, but it doesn't necessarily mean you should do anything about it on CRM.
Yeah, that's a great example. A great example.
Now, we've just about reached our time. So first of all, thank you very much to Rob and Adam. I've really enjoyed your time today. And if you've enjoyed this, then please have a listen to our podcast, New World Loyalty. We've got, just search on any podcast thing for the Loyalty Podcast. We've got 8 podcasts that cover not this subject, but similar subjects. So if you enjoyed this, there's probably some good things in there for you. You might not be commuting to work, but you might be walking the dog. So it's always good. If you could please join us on the 19th, our panel will be exploring the question of, are status levels and partnership deals broken, and what can partnership managers do about it? And I think we've even discussed some of that today. So that's going to be hosted by Adam Feldman and be joined by the great Alan Lias. So please, if you like this podcast, please like, share on LinkedIn to raise the profile and to share with your friends. And please reply if you'd like to hear a replay of this. Please go to the Loyalty Summit YouTube page. So thank you very much again, Adam and Rob, and thank you very much to the audience. We'll see you soon, I'm sure.
Thanks very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.